Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. This is Hosea 5. That's Hosea Perek Hey. And this is Saul Weiner, the host for your podcast. The last chapter we did had several major points, but one of the major points was the criticism that Hosea, the prophet, had towards the people for being too arrogant to accept rebuke. So much so that those prophets whose job it would have been and should have been to give rebuke and teach the people the proper path didn't do it. They were either too afraid, too weak, too scared, or sometimes even corrupted themselves, and therefore they didn't do their job. Hosea obviously is the one, our prophet is the one who's trying to do his job and give them the rebuke that they so desperately need. And his example, then, he compared the people to the Kohanim, to the priests, who were an example of those that were so arrogant that they thought so highly of themselves that they refused to humble themselves and listen to instruction on how to be better. With that, let's begin verse 1 in chapter 5 as he continues on that theme. Shim'u zos hakohanim. Listen to this, you priests. Bihakshivu, and listen carefully, Beis Yisrael, people of Israel. Ubeit HaMelech, and the house of the king, Ha'azinu. Pay attention. He uses three languages here of listening. Shim'u, the language of Shemiah, which generally means to hear. Hakshivu, which means to listen really well. And Ha'azinu means to really pay attention. This is a language which we found in the beginning of Isaiah as well, where he switches between the languages of Ha'azinu and Shim'u, using these different languages of hearing. But here Hosea chooses three languages, and he refers to all three major groups: the priests, the people, and the house of the king, the royalty, all of which presumably he's referring to the royalty of the northern kingdom. As we know, most of his words are directed against the northern kingdom. All three groups are too haughty, too arrogant, and are not listening, and not paying attention. And therefore he's asking them to. Why? Ki lochem hamishpat. Because it is your job to make sure there is justice. Justice is your job. Now most commentaries assume that Ki lochem hamishpat is going on the last group, the house of the king, which is generally more associated with the system of justice. However, I believe lochem is plural, and it's going on all three groups. So he's saying, Shimu, Kohanim, Beis Yisrael, Beit HaMelech, all of you should listen, Ki lochem, because you, in plural, are responsible for making sure that there is mishpat. And mishpat, justice, is something which this prophet, and all the prophets for that matter, have been pounding into our hearts, is a job of the entire society. Listen, why? Because instead of doing mishpat, which is your job, instead the following has been what you've been doing. Ki pach heisem limitzpah. You have been as a pach. Now, I see that the JPS translates a pach as a snare. The pach is a kind of a trap, is something that will stop people and trap people that are on their way to doing good, or on their path of life, whatever that path is. This pach, this stumbling block, this snare will stop them, block them, trap them, hook them into a bad path. Lemitzpah on the mountaintops, on the high places, vireshes piruso al tovar, and more so on the other high mountains, you are like a net. These are two different types of traps. One is a snare, a stumbling block you have been. In other words, you have put up things, you have put up ideas which block people from going the right direction, and then you have put out a net that entraps them. Enticements that entrap them and bring them into this world of corruption that you're building. Many look at these as a reference to the mountains which the northern kings placed sentries and guards to make sure the people of the northern kingdom wouldn't go to the southern kingdom, to the temple, to worship in Jerusalem, which is certainly one way of understanding it. However, it doesn't necessarily need to be that. It's just saying that you have been like a pach and a reshes. And it continues in this next verse with a very difficult phrase to translate it in verse 2. But I'm going to go through the way I'm translating it. V'shachatos seitim he'emiku. And they... Shachata seitim he'emiku. Now, shachata is a language of lishchot, to shecht, or to, which usually means to slaughter. Now, like as in to slaughter an animal, to consume the animal. However, or to use it to slaughter it as a sacrifice. So many commentaries go off in that direction, assuming that this shachata means that. However, the actual root of the word, as pointed out by some of the commentaries, specifically Rashi, points out over here that v'shachata really comes from the language of chetz shachut, which is a sharpened arrow, or a zahav shachut, or gold which has been purified, refined, and stretched thin. And that's really what this shachata here means. Now, seitim is a derogatory word for those people that, seitim are those that make people turn away, or things that turn people away, or things that trap people. Now, because of the context, seitim here would either mean that they sharpen their traps, he'emiku, and they lay them deep. Because of the context, I agree with the JPS translation here that seitim probably means the trappers, those of you guys who are setting the traps, as opposed to the traps themselves. And you are sharpening your traps and laying them deep in the ground to hide them, so that people don't even realize they're getting entrapped in your corruption, but then you do. So v'shachatos seitim he'emiku, va'ani, and I, says Hosea the prophet, musar l'kulam. I am the one who is here to give rebuke and teach and reprimand all of you groups, all of you people, the Kohanim, the Beis Yisrael, and the Beit HaMelech. I, says the prophet, Ani yodati Ephraim. I know Ephraim. Now, because the first king of the northern kingdom was from the tribe of Ephraim, the northern kingdom, which was a confederation of the 10 northern tribes, Ephraim was one of the major ones. So often, all of the 10 northern kingdoms are called Ephraim, similar to the southern kingdom, which is called Judah, even though it consisted of Judah, Benjamin, and various portions of other tribes, but mostly Judah and Benjamin, and it's called Judah. The northern kingdom, because that was the main one, the northern kingdom was often called Ephraim because it was a major tribe. But Hosea, his way is to call it Ephraim and Israel, because he's calling Ephraim plus all the others. So Ani Adati, I know Ephraim, v'Yisrael lo nichad mimeni, and the bad habits of Israel, the entire northern kingdom, is not hidden from me. I know exactly what's going on. Ki ato hizneischa Ephraim, because now you, Ephraim, have turned away from God. And he's again using the metaphor of a woman who turns away, an unfaithful spouse for that matter. Nitmo Yisrael, and Israel, the entire northern tribe, you have all become defiled with your rebellious ways. Lo yitnu ma'al alehem lo shuv el Elohem. Your ways, the ways and habits that you have developed, and your sneaky ideas will not even allow you to return towards your God. Ki ruach zinunim b'kirbam, because there is a spirit of zinunim, of turning away, of dishonesty, of unloyalty and unfaithfulness within you in the kingdom of Israel. V'es Adonai lo yoda'u, and they do not know God. Again, criticizing the people for their lack of knowledge of God, the lack of das. V'ona gaon Yisrael, and what is it? The pride of Israel, their arrogance is going to answer, is going to speak for them. before them. V'Yisrael v'Ephraim yikashlu ba'avonam. And Israel and Ephraim are going to trip over and get stuck in their sins because of their pride, again, criticizing their arrogance. And when people are arrogant, they don't listen to rebuke, they don't improve. That's the issue. People can sin, people can make mistakes, but as long as they're humble, they can improve. But if there's Gaon Yisrael, they will not improve, which is why he said in verse 4, Lo yitnu ma'alaleim l'shuv el Eloheim. Their ways will not allow them to return because of their arrogance. And not only that, but Koshal Gam Yehuda Imam. Judah is also tripping and stumbling together with them. What are they doing? How are they trying to find God? They're making a big mistake. They're taking their sheep and their cattle and going to search out for God by bringing sacrifices. However, if that's what they try to do, they will not find him. God has cast them off, sent them away. If this is how you're going to serve him, simply by trying to bring sacrifices, God will cast them away. He's not going to listen. Because Ba'adonai bagadu, he says in verse 7, because they have rebelled against God. Kivonim zorim yoladu. They have given birth to children that are foreign. Now, what does this mean? If you rebel against God, sacrifices won't do anything for you. Banim zorim yoladu reminds us of what we had in last chapter, in chapter 4, verse 10, where the prophet warned us and said, they will turn in other directions. They will have improper relationships and build families that will not prosper because they left God out. Now, they can be referring to actual children because they raise them in corrupt ways, or it could be referring to their deeds. And now, therefore, because that was done in an improper way, every month their portions, their fortunes will be eaten away and deteriorate further and further. Now in verse 8, Bagadu, that was verse 7. Verse 8, Tiku shofar bagiva. Blow a shofar, sound a shofar in Giva. Chatzot b'Ramah, blow trumpets in Ramah. Hari ubeis aven. Call out in loud announcements in Beit Aven, Acharecha Binyamin. I'm trying to translate this verse like the translation of the Malbim, that all of these places are actually in Binyamin. And here we have the in the southern kingdom, and Hosea is turning to the southern kingdom and telling them, blow your horn, call out to the northern kingdom. Call them and say, Acharecha Binyamin. Call the northern kingdom and say they should come after you. In other words, it's your job to rebuke your brothers in the north. These places, blow the horn, get their attention. However, in verse 9, he says, Ephraim l'shamotiyeh. Ephraim is going to be destroyed b'yom tochecha, on the day that you give them rebuke. B'shivtei Yisrael hodati namana. In the tribes of the northern kingdom of Israel, I know well that even when you do rebuke them, it's going to make it worse, not better. Why? Because hayu sorei Yehuda kimasige gvol. Because the people of Yehuda are not giving a rebuke. They're bad neighbors. A masig gvol is a bad neighbor, a neighbor whom you fight with, who constantly moves the fence over in a little direction to steal some of your field. The people of the south and the people of the north don't get along. The people of the north won't listen to the rebuke. And in the end, the fact that they get the rebuke will make things even worse. And therefore, Aleihem eshboch kamayim evrasi, I'm going to end up pouring out like water my anger against them. Ashuk Ephraim ritzutz mishpat, in verse 11. Most of the commentaries assume that Ashuk Ephraim means Ephraim will be Ashuk. They will be their properties taken away. They will be defrauded, or ritzutz mishpat. They will be mishpat, justice will be taken away from them. I'm going to translate this a little differently. Ashuk Ephraim means Ephraim is full of ashuk, of oshek. It's full of fraud. Ritzutz mishpat, they have no justice. Their justice is smashed, is crushed. Ki ho'il holach acharei tzav, because they have wanted to go after tzav. Very difficult word to translate, but I'm going to go with the rabbis in Bereshit Rabbah, who explain that tzav is a reference to avodah zarah, to idol worship. Ki ho'il halach acharei tzav. This is in Bereshit Rabbah 16:6, for those that want to look it up. Ba'ani, and I, says God, ka'osh le'Ephraim, I will be like a, osh is some kind of a mold or some kind of a worm that causes rot in clothing for Ephraim. Uchirakov lebeis Yehuda, I'm going to be like a decaying rot for the house of Judah, because they're not listening. Bayar Ephraim es cholyo, Ephraim will see their illness, they'll see things not going well. Yehuda es mizoro, and Yehuda will see his problems, see things turning not in his direction. And what are they going to do? Vayelech Ephraim el Ashur, they're going to look not to God, but they're going to look to other sources. They're going to go to Ashur, to Assyria, to the powers that be, the nations, the powerful nations. That's where they're going to turn, away from God and towards other places in order for it to get help. Vayishlach el melech Yarev, they're going to go to the king that who supposedly they're going to help them. However, v'hu lo yuchal polachem, he will not be able to heal you. V'lo yigemichem azar, and Yehuda, he will not be able to correct the problems that you have, because that's not going to work. You should have turned to me. Ki anochi kashachal Ephraim, because I will be like a shachal, is a language that refers to a lion. V'chakfir is a young lion. Lebeis Yehuda. Ani etrof ve'elech. God says, it is I that is punishing you. It is I that is tearing you up. Esavi ein masil. I am the one that is carrying you away as prey, and no one is saving you. You need to turn to me for savior, to be saved, to be helped. You need to turn back to God, not to other places, not to other kings. Elech, God says, Ashuva al mukomi, I'll go back to my place. Ad asher yeshmu, until your sins get so bad that finally you realize, uvikshufana, you search for me. Batsar lahem, when you get to a point of suffering and nothing else is helping, yishacharununi, and you start to pray to me and beg for me, that is when God says, I will finally listen to your prayers. Thank you so much for studying Hosea 5 with me. Looking forward to studying Hosea 6 together.